Hello, everybody. Welcome to Pharmaceutical Soccer on this, I don't know, day of grieving, probably is we probably had a couple days to grieve, unfortunately, over our beloved Nashville SC, but I'm I'm happy because I am here with Valer Shabila and Clay Trainum. It's good to be back with the both of you, even though we get to talk about something so egregious that I don't want to talk about it, but we have to because we signed up for this 6 years ago, as we have stated. Blair, Clay, how were your weekends?
I'll let Valera go first because mine is considerably more depressing.
Yeah, I will. I will go. I'm gonna keep this one short. Surprisingly, I know we have more important topics to get to, I guess, but I watched some college basketball, which is rare, incredibly rare for me. I was
Middle got
fully
screwed.
committed. Yes, I was fully committed and fully supportive of the MTSU women basketball team. Shout out to the Lady Blue Raiders. Uh, but unfortunately, refereeing mistakes haunt me any game and any sport I watch, apparently. So it haunted me into the LSU MTSU game on Sunday afternoon. But they did have a great win before that against Louisville. So honestly, I don't know much about college basketball. I don't know much about college sports as a whole, but this team got me something to believe in for a little bit. So that was fun to follow them. And overall, I am lead. I am in two groups of March Madness brackets, and I am the number one in both groups. And it makes no sense because I don't know where half of these schools are even are. Like if it doesn't have like a state in the name, I don't know. I don't know what St. Mary's is. I don't know anything about this. So
I
yeah,
have had a
I'm doing all
good
right, I
I
guess.
have had a good time quizzing Valera in some of these places, and I've been asking him to give me three states. I can do it for you. Clay, do you know what state Duquesne is in?
Pennsylvania. It's in Pittsburgh.
Crap.
Yeah,
He would
it's Clay. Of course he's gonna
that
know.
would be Clay
He
knowledge.
works in this.
Do you know
Catholic
where
school. I used to work in the same league as Keith Dambrot,
do you know where
the
Wagner
retiring coach of
is?
Do
Do you know where
What?
Wagner is?
You cut out there. What was that?
Do you know where Wagner is?
Yeah, New York.
This game is not fun with Clay.
I deferred to an equipment manager there.
See, and it's always going to be something. There's going to be some sort of tie
I
to it.
told you, yeah, Clay's not the gate. Yeah, but anyway,
I worked just everyone mostly knows this. I worked 15 years in college sports, guys. So like it's I'm the statistician for MTSU women's basketball. And let me tell you, a 37-9 free throw disparity is a little strange, but I'll leave it at that. As for my weekend, I spent 9 days in the hospital with my dad. So it's been a long week or so. That is why I missed last week. My dad is still in the hospital, but he seems to have turned a corner at this point. So thanks to everyone who has reached out in the past week or so. But I did watch the Charlotte game from ICU, and that was a nice like pick me up. We were like half watching it, obviously, and then I got home Saturday, and after a long, long week, and we decided to stay up late to watch the LAFC game, and they were just like, "Oh yeah, here you go, enjoy this." to end your run in Evansville. So yeah, very um I guess grand scheme of things, it's a good week to have before Nashville's biggest ever loss because it's just like whatever, at the end of the game. Whereas if that would have happened 2 weeks ago, I think I would have come in a little bit more rip roaring hot about it. So um if I'm going to silver linings it, I guess that's the way to silver linings it. It's not as bad as a 9 day hospital stay, I guess. I don't know. So say la vie.
Yeah. I mean, no, Clay, but yeah, thank you again for everybody reaching out just to make sure Clay's all good and all that type of stuff. We're glad to hear that Dad's taking a turn for the best as well. That's good. So appreciate that. Um my weekend, I mean, hey, Nashville is terrible, but the US won a match against Mexico, which was always fun for me to watch. So that was really cool, especially since Tyler Adams hit one of the best shots I've ever seen in my life. So I'm excited to talk about that in the third segment. And that was kind of a lame weekend for me. I did go to a went to a Reddit meetup on Friday night in Washington, D.C. So that was fun. it was just a Washington D.C. subreddit Reddit meetup, so that was cool. Um, I think I have to start going to at least some sort of soccer out here just to watch good soccer at some point. I don't know. I mean, I think the Washington Spirit are pretty good. I don't know how Loudoun's doing at the current moment, even though I coach them.
Not great.
Yeah, man, this is just tough.
Loudon is right there.
I know. I know.
But
I'm
that's
going.
not
Like
like
I said, I'm
soccer.
going to Loudon. I'm gonna go. I like eventually. I don't know. I got to look at their schedule. Maybe this weekend. Who knows? If they're at home this weekend, I'll go this weekend. But look, I would rather continue talking about our weekends, and finding some sort of silver lining. But we got to talk about Nashville's worst loss in club history, to LAFC. Um, I don't. I don't think there's any like just kind of positive way to talk about it. I think probably the best way to start it would be with the Twitter poll. I think that's probably the best way to go about it because I think that'll start a lot of just different conversation. So Valer, why don't you kind of just start with that Twitter poll?
Yeah, so Monday poll, weekly segment, except that one week I missed it.
Which was last week, by the way.
Well, last week, yeah, when I missed it. There were a lot going on last week, okay? But Monday poll, we put out a poll in our Twitter account and trying to get some opinions from you guys, from the listeners, and from everybody out there. We've had 130 votes on this one, so pretty good showing. I posted it a little bit over an hour ago, so so far so good with that one. And the question is, what is Nashville's biggest problem? Kept it pretty simple because we've heard a lot of different opinions on this. The four options were general manager or FO, coaching, players not performing, and other, or comment below, I guess. The winner, but by a very small margin, was coaching. People seem to think that 38.5% of people seem to think that coaching is the biggest problem, while 34.6% think the general manager slash FO is the biggest problem. Again, I know that the issues are kind of all the above. I understand that, but the question is the biggest problem. So, what is the number one priority, I guess? And those two seems to be taking the lead in our Twitter poll. Third came in players not performing, so that's about 20% or 20.8% to be exact. And then others had 6.2%, and some comments below said ownership. Some other folks saying all of the above again, and big focus on the midfield from a lot of people. So yes, of course, all these problems are big for Nashville SC, but I think we're seeing kind of where most of the blame goes in, as almost 75% of this poll is on the general manager or coaching.
Yeah, I think it was after the Galaxy match where we had a poll as well when it was just like, okay, how are we feeling, about this? And when it was like the extremely positive, somewhat negative, extremely negative, where most of the people were kind of in that somewhat positive spot. I think the both of you were, where I was just like, look, this this team letting up a lead like that, or just giving up a lead like that, giving up two goals is worrying because that's something that Nashville had always been able to do, has been able to close down a game. And we, I mean, I just have never seen such a terrible performance from this, or just such a defeated performance from this team. Like it is worrying, and I don't necessarily know where it starts, but I think the maybe where the trouble comes in from the fans specifically is that that's the good thing and the bad thing about having such a built up owner to GM to coach working in tandem. When it does go wrong, which it's currently going wrong right now, what is the fix? Because if you do get rid of, say, the coach specifically, if you do get rid of the GM specifically, it will take years for any sort of rebuild. And the players that we currently have involved in this system are, we have talented players. There's just something that is not connecting. And I don't know. As fans, I think we think there's an easy option, but I don't know if there is.
Well, that's the thing, right? there's not really an easy thing to point to fix, which is why the frustration tends to come out towards front office and coaching. Like I think that that's the easy fall on. Like at this point of the season, that's who you're going to pick it. And a lot of this is also based in what happened towards the end of last season as well, which we should keep in mind. I don't agree that a rebuild takes years. FC Cincinnati was the worst team in the history of the league for 3 years, and they made the playoffs they made changes, made the playoffs the first year, and then won the Supporters Shield the second year after those changes. So this is a league where you can turn things around very quickly. And with Nashville, they wouldn't necessarily be turning around something that is unable to be repaired. It's something that has pieces, good pieces. And so I think that a lot of this result that people are looking at coaching and general managers based on frustration that doesn't totally jive with the makeup of the roster as it stands. I would be inclined to agree that it's kind of all of the above. I mean, obviously, they had some plans from a coaching standpoint that they wanted to change and change the way they played, but then those were kind of undone pretty early by injuries. The team is supposed to be deep, and we expected depth, and injuries have kind of exposed that depth a little bit. And there's a lot going on. I don't necessarily think these are things that can't be fixed. Even with the current makeup, I do think it's worrying, but I don't think it's like, uh-oh, this is going to be a long year because of this, that, and the third happened when you've got schedule congestion at the start of the calendar.
The biggest issue here is that, well, I mean, this is Nashville's first loss in MLS this season, which, obviously it doesn't feel like it. It feels much worse than just one loss because it's 5-0 and because it was an absolutely shambolic performance out there. I mean, there was just no other way of going about it. I think what's worrying for me the most is that Nashville are not doing very well in the things that they're supposed to be very good at. Right? That's the part. The part is that the front office finds value in those who don't have as much value or are undervalued, and they bring them into the club where working hard and being defensively solid puts the foundation out to go and for the attackers to go and take advantage of moments from the other team not attacking. However, none of that is happening. I understand that the injuries are happening, and I understand that international duty has taken players away, and we'll get more into details about that. The thing that bothers me is that Nashville has been able to do it with quote unquote backup guys before. And even if when they're not able to do it, they don't lose 5-0. And that's, I think, the biggest worry here is that even if you can't win or get a draw, you were never having a performance like this before.
I agree. I agree that it's very worrying. What I will say, and this is kind of what I'm going to hang my hat on, especially since I don't have to come back on this show next week because I'll be in England, is that it seems less likely that Nashville suddenly forgot how to do all these things that they've been good at for the last 5 years, then 6 years, whatever, than anything that's structurally long term. It is potential. I mean, it is possible. We see coaches kind of fizzle out every league in the world. It just seems like the mistakes they're making and the way that they're playing is just so far removed from the last several years of data that we have on the team that it seems unlikely that that's going to be something that continues. Now, if it does, it's worrying, and I think they're going to see a change happen quicker than some may expect. But I think it's a little bit early to bank on that being something that continuously happens going forward this early in the season.
But don't worry, we get to figure that out in probably our easiest run of schedule here in MLS for sure in the next few weeks. We'll definitely talk about that in segment 3. We definitely have to talk about the match in detail next. One good thing that has happened over the weekend, though, that I would like to talk about is a new Patreon member, which is fantastic. Shout out to Matthew for signing up for the Patreon. We really, really, really appreciate it. Again, no last name just because. But just want to thank you, Matthew, so much for joining. You can be a Patreon member as well, get thanked on the show. Go to our Pharma Soccer Patreon. $5 a month just helps keep the show going. We really, really appreciate it, and we need all of your support and help. Gives us the ability to do a lot of fun and cool things. So please make sure, if you can, sign up for that.
It's patreon.com/pharmasoccer, not the other way around. But thank you, Steven. And thank you, Matthew. Just
You
sending
can find
people
all
to the
of it
right
at
place.
pharmasoccer.com.
Yeah, you can do that too. But
wait, we have a
go to
website?
patreon.com. What?
We've had a website for years.
What?
What
Do,
do
do
you
we-
mean?
Do we have a website?
Where have you
Steven,
been?
are you serious?
Yes. Why would I not be kidding right now?
It's been like 2 years. Anyway,
We'll be back
go to
after this.
pharmasoccer.com. Yeah, I mean, that's where you get Pharma Soccer stuff. I don't know. Apparently that's revolutionary. Clay, maybe we add a Patreon page, I guess, because now Steven has a URL out there that we don't have. So, you know.
We'll be back to talk about LAFC match here shortly.
Anyway, thank you all for listening to segment 1. We'll be back shortly.
And we are back right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer, of course, at Pharma Soccer on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And as I mentioned in the first segment, we also have a Patreon, so please go check us out there. And also, as I learned in that first segment, we also have a website, so please go check us out at pharmasoccer.com to get all of your Pharma Soccer information and updates. It was very nice to see the website. All right, anyways, look, we have to, unfortunately, talk about a 5-0 loss. I'm still laughing internally from this whole website thing. A lot of emotions are going on at the current moment because I also don't want to talk about this 5-0 loss. But again, Nashville does lose 5-0 to LAFC in LA, with Denny Bouanga getting a goal, Timothy Tillman getting a goal, Christian Oliveira getting a goal. Dennis Bouanga got 2 goals, actually. And then Atuesta getting a goal as well. Joe Willis gets a red card. I think kind of the best way to kind of start with it is the lineup. I don't want the lineup to be an excuse for the performance, though, because we've seen the players that were in this lineup perform, even when it was just a backup. We have seen this lineup perform. I mean, you both talked to me about how Kalman had a really good game that one game and was a part of the lineup, all that type of stuff, and I just didn't think so. Some of that showed I still think he was probably the best defender out there on Saturday in some ways. I mean, definitely some injury problems. Walker Zimmerman not in the lineup. Lucas McNaughton not in the lineup. Jacob Schaffelberg and Annabelle Godoy on international duty. So there was definitely some holes, but look, we've been talking about Brian Anunga playing fantastic the past, couple weeks. Drew Yearwood finally starting to get into shape here. Taylor Washington, being extremely important and vital to this lineup. And there was just nothing. There was just nothing when it came to kind of cohesion between everybody in the team.
I think there was always a chance that it would go wrong, right? I mean, it was never going to work out that maybe the guys who haven't been as high on the depth chart to come in and continue to be really good and win all the starting spots. There's always going to be a drop off. Again, this drop off shouldn't have been a 5-0 loss. There's always little mistakes here and there. Lucas McNaughton had a hip injury. He was good until a day before the game, and then all of a sudden when they were traveling to LA, they noticed something that wasn't going well, so he didn't feature in this match. Walker Zimmerman obviously still out, so that forces Gary Smith to go with Jack Mayer and Kalman, and I think if anything, that back line with Taylor Washington and Shaq Moore, they just haven't had reps together. We talked about how that's important, but I think before we go into any player and kind of look at the individual mistakes of each player, which there were plenty of, I think we need to make sure that we address the fact that when the entire team is playing like crap, and there's no sugarcoating here, I think those individual mistakes are highlighted, And I think, we maybe tend to be fixated about this little mistake here, this little mistake there, but I can't tell you a single Nashville player who had a good game in that match. So
Nope.
when that's the case, it's really hard for me to pick and choose which players, I go in on, I guess, when it comes to that, because the entire team was terrible.
I think if we're going to talk about the lineup, Valaire's mentioned this on Twitter a few times. We've talked about it on this show a whole bunch. Gary Smith, which is a fairly typical manager practice. If a guy's in form, they're going to play even over the player that was out injured or wasn't quite hitting levels early on. And the big question when that lineup came out was Taylor Washington instead of Dan Lovitz, and obviously Todd Ryan Anunga instead of Sean Davis. Now, big picture, we know who the better players are at those positions, but you play the guys in form, and I think that was exposed a little bit in a game like this, where Washington didn't have his best game. I will say that if a whole team is playing bad, the people who end up looking the most exposed are the defenders. But Washington obviously didn't have his as good a game as he's had been having, especially defensively. And then Tom Ryan Anunga, I mean, it was a genuine step back for him in terms of his level this season. I would like to come back to talking about the center backs just a little bit, because I do think both of them didn't particularly cover themselves in glory, but like Brent Coleman did make one of the better tackles I've ever seen from a Nashville player in that first half. And I think that Jack Mayer he might be wandering the desert a little bit. I think he's he's trying to find his form again. And I'm kind of curious. He's a young player. We sometimes see these like sort of peaks and valleys at young players. I think last year you would have classified Jack Mayer as being mostly peaks. It was his best season with Nashville, especially before the All-Star break. And I think he didn't accidentally lose out his spot to Lucas McNaughton in some of these games. I think he's really struggling to find his footing this season so far. I think he's going to be all right. He's a good player. We've seen the best version of Jack Mayer, but or we've seen a good version of Jack Mayer that we hope can be an even better version. And I really do. I'm kind of curious to see how he handles um, this little run patchy form that he's been dealing with. That was definitely there for everyone to see on Saturday.
Yeah, I think it's interesting just because I think a lot of the discussion is going to be like about what's next, but like we do specifically have to talk about the game. I mean, if there was any player that I thought like that game could have been 10-0 in some instances, I think Joe Willis did come up with a few big saves. Obviously he had the first mistake. I think he had a mistake on the first goal when it came to coming out on the set piece, but I mean, that game could have been even a lot worse than it actually was. Like if you just watch the highlights, which I had to do because I turned it off after the third goal. I was not continuing to watch this game, that like Joe Willis had to make a bunch of big saves, even, the red card save that he had to make. Um, I mean, yeah, I think a lot of the question is about what's next, even though you do have to talk about the match itself.
Well, I think it's important to just keep game states in mind here. Obviously, after the third goal, I mean, after the first goal, Nashville wasn't playing the same game that it went into play at LAFC. And certainly after the second goal, it changes their whole game plan. And I will say that the end of the second half, basically up until or the end of the first half, up until the last few minutes of added time, Nashville was certainly in the ascendancy.
I was going to say the same thing. I was going to say
Yeah, and
that.
so in the same way that Nashville was a little lucky that it only got to the half at 2-0, they were also a little unlucky that they didn't have a goal on the board. And whether it's the disallowed Surge goal, which I think is fine being disallowed, although I've seen that goal allowed in this league hundreds of times in the last 20 years. Or he had a decent opportunity off a Washington cross that just got blocked. That probably 10, 15 minutes into the game. Like he had a couple of good chances. So I'm hesitant to lean too far into like 5-0. That's such a terrible scoreline, which it is. It is. But I also know that if you're going into a game, with a certain game plan, and then that gets blown up in the first half, it's kind of hard to pull yourself back into a different game plan, on that basis. So I'm a little bit hesitant to go like too far into overanalyzing the last 30 minutes of the game. But the first half, I think there's plenty of stuff to analyze there, that doesn't make you feel good.
I think this game played out until the red card. Everything up until the red card played out exactly like the Miami game in Fort Lauderdale a couple of weeks ago. It almost identical manner. Nashville has defensive troubles. Miami capitalized. Here, LAFC capitalized on those. 2-0. Nashville start to play themselves into the game a little bit here and there. They have a few chances. They score a disallowed goal. And then the second half starts. Miami puts the third one in. Here, LAFC puts the third one in. And it's just game over at that point. Even though Nashville went and got one in Miami, here, Nashville went and got a red card, which just allowed LAFC to go back and score a couple more. The moral story here is that first of all, why is Nashville so bad all of a sudden in the thing that they were known for? Literally last season, the season before, and the season before, and the season before. That's the one thing they could hang their hat on, was the defensive. So the biggest question is what happened there? And it can't be just injuries. It can be just that. The second thing is why can't Nashville come back even though they're playing themselves into the game? Now, the general thought here is that if you go 2-0 down in most cases, you're making it very hard on yourself to come back to start with. But with what they were given, with the amount of space they were given, with the amount of ball they were given towards the end of the first half, they should have been able to get something back. And like Clay said, they got close to it. So, I mean, the situation here is just like, I think it's a full-on team not being able to perform on either side of the pitch that really resulted in this.
Yeah, like absolutely. And I think I disagree with some of Clay's point when it comes to like being able to change the aspects of the game. I still think, again, with what you showed after the end of the first half, you had the ability to come into that second half and play the game completely differently. And it just didn't happen. Taylor Washington does get subbed out for Dan Lovitz. You expect something to kind of change, but nothing really. I think this is the first time for me, and I don't necessarily like talking about this because I'm not a player. I'm not in a player's mindset, so I'm not gonna know if this is actually what happened on the field or not. But from the looks of it, this looked like the first time to me as a Nashville fan specifically, where it just seemed like the team gave up. It just seemed like the team did not have any sort of drive or will to play. Even with that third goal, it wasn't like let's go. There wasn't any of that specifically, and that is a major concern for me.
Well, to be fair, I wasn't dismissing the entire half. I said giving up the third goal at the start of the half is where I think it kind of became, one of those games. And those do happen in MLS. We've seen Nashville, maybe not 5-0, but we've seen a 4-1 from this Nashville team. We've seen a poor performance in Atlanta. Like, we've seen some bad.
Yeah, but we can name those. Like there were only 3.
No, that's literally what I'm saying. Is like those can happen. The thing that I'm choosing to hang my hat on here is that I have a hard time thinking that we're going to see this type of performance again. You know what I mean? Because the data doesn't show that it's going to happen again. And so that's the part where there are concerns. I'm absolutely concerned about a team that lost 5-0. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that it seems more likely that Nashville's going to figure it out than not figure it out on the basis that these things have happened a few times before.
And I think I agree with you. I don't think Nashville will not have a 5-0 loss or lose by 5 goals again the rest of this season. But it also is like, what is then the ceiling and what is then the fix to that? Is now the fix just being, hey, is losing 2-0 good enough now compared to losing 5-0? Like, what is the fix in that way?
Well, I think we're fixated on results because this is a soccer show and soccer is all about results, and I understand that. But I think the biggest fix here has to be performance-based more than results-based. If Nashville goes out and puts a really good performance against Columbus Crew coming up and lose 2-1 in a last-minute header or something, yeah, there are going to be people upset about it, but I think that the performance here is the number one thing, because you want you want progression, and you want somebody to make up for their mistakes, whether it's players, coaches, etc. So I think, to me, what I'm looking at is, how can you not make defensive mistakes in the first 20 minutes? And then if you do make those defensive mistakes, can you come back from them? If Columbus goes and gets a goal in 15 minutes, can you come back and tie the game? Because Nashville hasn't been able to do that.
And that's something that we've seen from the good Nashville teams where they do give up. I used to joke with someone who worked with the club that I almost felt more comfortable when they were down 1-0 early, because I knew that Nashville would have to open up a little bit and start to play, and they tended to get some good results. Now this is a few years ago, to be fair, but I will say, if we're talking about results, or if we're talking about performance versus results, that goes into the conversation that we had about the LA Galaxy game 2 weeks ago, right? Where blew a 2-0 lead, that's bad. But the performance was a good performance from Nashville SC that we hadn't seen up to that point. And so I think that that's kind of, I really want people to think about performances, because performances are more indicative of like results than, willing out a performance, a 1-0 where you get outplayed the whole time. You know what I mean? So I agree with Valaire on that point. I will say this, and this is my big silver lining from the entire game, is that the first half, the big question going into this season was about Sam Surridge. And even though he didn't score, I put this on Twitter, even though he didn't score, there's no evidence from that first half that shows that he won't be the guy. I think that we're starting to see what we hope to see out of him. He's getting in good spots. He's getting on the end of crosses. He had this circuitous run where he put a defender on the ground right when he entered the box. It's a tough shot. He doesn't score from it, but like, that's the stuff that we hadn't been seeing, where he was in a position where if a couple more things go his way, then we're talking about him in a big way at halftime. And I think that that's the type of thing that I look at from a game where you get absolutely outplayed everywhere else, and say, that's something to build on. That's something you can move forward with. Second half notwithstanding, but like, that's something that you can move forward with. And I think it's important to look for those things too.
So I agree, Clay. Absolutely. I do think, even like with the disallowed goal, I think Sam Surge is finding his footing with this team a little bit. I think there's still probably a little bit of work that he has to do with Hani Mukhtar and Tyler Boyd to get that, like, the communication and the passing down. But I think that would just come with a little bit of time of just being on the pitch. I literally have just been sitting here thinking about Valaire's hypothetical about if Nashville puts on like a decent performance against Columbus, but get like Columbus gets a last minute goal to win 2-1 or something like that. I'm just as mad now. Like, I would be just as mad about Nashville losing to Columbus 2-1 than I would be with this 5-0 loss, because they did, even though the data supports the data supports, right, that, hey, Nashville didn't lose 5-0. That's an improvement. We're still doing the same thing again of losing. Like we're losing a game, which is something that Nashville is not.
Hold on. I'm not saying, like, if that happened, like, first of all, it's a hypothetical, whatever. Like,
No, and I know
it's
specifically.
But I'm not saying if it happens, everybody's happy. I'm just saying it's an improvement. You asked me how to improve the team. That's how you improve the team. You get a better performance out. Yeah. And that 2-1 is better than 5-0. That's just facts. I'm sorry. Like no, I'm not saying right. You didn't ask me what is the ideal scenario here or the best thing to happen. The best thing to happen is for Nashville to win a game. I was just asked, how do you measure improvement? To me, the way you measure improvement is if that performance gets better. If you go down and come back, then that is already better than what you did the week before. And that's the easiest way to measure improvement in performance.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, and I understand where you're coming from there. I just think it's, I don't know. I think it's just the conversation that we've always had with this club for the years and years that we have, been covering this team of why do we hope for, why are we hoping for 6th and 7th place the entire season? Or because, I mean, I don't know, where would you put us right now? Like, where do you think we're going to finish right now based on where we're at? I don't know if we're a playoff team.
Before we get into that, that's a whole different discussion. There's been 5 match days. I don't know if I can tell you who's a playoff team and who is not. But before we get into any of that, this is not the same conversation we've had about Nashville SC in the past. I will just not agree with that. This is not the same conversation. This is Nashville SC being able to go and score goals this season, but while they do that, they're conceding a lot of goals. This has never happened in the history of Nashville SC.
We didn't have the same conversation after Atlanta. We didn't have the same exact conversation after Atlanta.
What, Atlanta? 4-0?
Yeah, after Atlanta. Yeah, after Atlanta last year, we didn't have the same conversation.
No, that was literally the only time they conceded 4 goals in that entire season. Like, what I'm saying is that Nashville SC has been able to lose a game by 1 or 2 goals for the entirety of the end of last season. I'm not saying they were good. I'm just saying this is a different conversation than that, because Nashville SC are scoring goals. I know LAFC, they didn't score against LAFC, but they are scoring a lot more goals than their usual. They're also conceding a lot more goals than their usual. And that situation in its own has never happened with Nashville SC before. They usually don't score a lot of goals, and they usually don't concede a lot of goals. So this is a brand new thing we're talking about. Now, if you're talking about like, oh, why is Nashville SC's ambition not as high or whatever, that is a conversation we've had before, and I agree with that. But in terms of performances, this is brand new for Nashville.
I just want to interject one pretty important fact historically, not just for Nashville SC, but for MLS as a whole. And even though they only played 4 games in CONCACAF Champions League, if you go watch the teams that play in CONCACAF Champions League every year, they throw out some weird early season results. Like MLS throws out weird early season results anyway. I mean, Denny Boanga hadn't scored, going, so like there's some weird stuff that happens the first month of the season, and I just want people to keep that in mind. Like, it's the first month of the season, so you shouldn't make these grand pronouncements, but also it's the first month of the season and your team is playing in a competition it hasn't played in, a competition that has led to weird results from teams in the opening month of the season.
And I want to say, like, based on talking to Hani and Gary after the match, first of all, my biggest takeaway from Gary is that I asked him about why Nashville, what happened, right? And pretty much his response was that they didn't learn from lessons. They didn't manage the game at all. You play from the back, you get scored on. You play from the back again, you get scored on. You try to play from the back again. It just, there was no game management from the maybe more experienced players. And that's where I'm expecting somebody like Jack Mayer, Joe Willis. It is crazy that we're counting Jack Mayer as a more experienced player because Clay just called him a young player, which, he's a 5-year veteran at this point. So we should have expectations of him. Nashville SC should have expectations of him, and they do, and that's why he didn't play against Miami. Anyway, this is not on Jack Mayer. I'm just saying that's as an example. Somebody within that back line should have been like, hey, they are killing us on this press. Let's play it long, because Sam Surridge seems to be getting everything coming around him. Sam Surridge has been getting the second balls, and Drew Yearwood and Brian Anunga can push up higher. And at one point, Gary Smith was screaming at Taylor Washington and Shaq Moore to go higher up the field. You could hear through the broadcast. And the fact that those problems just weren't solved until it was 2-0 is worrying, right? And then I want to go into the last point I want to make here about Hani Mukhtar. Hani Mukhtar looked defeated after the match. And let's be honest, I mean, he lost 5-0. I don't know how many times in his life he's lost 5-0. He's not, it's not something that happens in a professional player's career that often. So I understand why he was defeated. He said we have to have goldfish memory. Shout out Ted Lasso, I guess, and kind of go on. And I asked him, hey, like, have you seen improvements from playing with the ball with Nashville SC? And his response to me was, it's not about improving right now. It's about just like getting back to where we used to be and what made us good. So to me, that's a player who knows kind of that they are in a very bad position at the moment and that they just need to get back to basics. And the biggest worry, and I'll leave with that, the biggest worry here is that can Gary Smith get this squad to go back to basics, to go back to what Clay was talking about, which was what the data shows us, that Nashville SC's solid foundation. Is Gary Smith capable of doing that in his 7th year with Nashville in general and 5th year in MLS? That's going to be the biggest question going into the rest of the season. Just based on what I've seen, I will say, yeah, probably he can. But I also understand if folks have doubts about it.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think I think it's interesting just to kind of like talk about the Hani perspective of needing to get back to basics. Where like I think Hani says that completely right, and I think that's great from Hani to kind of acknowledge and realize, especially from being a captain within his own team, of being able to kind of disperse that message of like, hey, we need to get back to where we were. I kind of want to make it like a yes or no, just because I think with just based on this result is interesting. I don't want to necessarily go to a predictor or stuff like that. But does your outlook change for Nashville SC throughout the rest of the season based on this result? Yes or no?
Yes.
Not this one result, no.
And I would say yes. So I think to me, and I think Blair, and I think a lot of the fan base is just like I know it's early, I know we've had some stuff, but again, I think Blair kind of brought it up in the best way possible. We have not talked about this before. We have talked about this team doing some pretty bad things, but this is one that we have not talked about before. And I think it'll be extremely interesting to see how this team responds next week against a team that looks like they're going to win MLS Cup again.
Not
Yeah.
against Charlotte. They lost to Charlotte, but yeah,
I mean,
it was
again,
that game was incredible.
But also classic weird results in the first month of the season when I was talking about too. So like,
no, that one was purely on the referees. I will not accept anything else.
Yeah,
Sorry.
but let me tell you, as far as I want I want obviously no scab refs, anything like that. But like, it's not that weird to have weird refereeing decisions in this league, especially the first
Oh
month.
yeah. What are you talking about? It's always perfect in any
Well,
league in the world.
we do have some international matches to talk about. We get to talk about some fun soccer for a little bit when it comes to talking about some international matches. And then we get to talk about Nashville's schedule coming up as well, because I think that's very important. And then give our predictions for the Columbus match. And we'll do that next right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer. And we are back right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer, of course, at PharmaSoccer on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can also check us out on Patreon, as I talked about in the first segment and segment, patreon.com/PharmaSoccer, and also check out our website at pharmasoccer.com. I am so excited now to bring that up in every single introduction that I have, now that I know that exists. So that's fantastic. Something else that did happen over the week is international break started. So there were a couple of Nashville omissions just because of the fact that they were on international break. I think the best one and the best performance to talk about is Jacob Schaffelberg, but I will let Valer kind of take over when it comes to talking about the Nashville players on international duty.
Yeah, a couple Nashville players played. We'll start with Jacob Schaffelberg because, like Steven said, I think he had the best weekend out of any Nashville player. He scored a goal for his nation, Canada, as they were in a qualifier against Trinidad and Tobago. The winner of that qualifier goes to Copa America and will play in the in the opener of Copa America against Argentina in Atlanta. So they will also be in the group with Argentina, obviously. So big deal. Canada were up 1-0. They brought him on in the 70th minute. And as soon as he came on, he was rapid. I mean, he was the Jacob Schaffelberg we know and see here in Nashville every week. Had a couple really good runs. He was all over the pitch, and he had an incredible shot that was denied by the post. And then shortly after that, it was a Trinidad and Tobago were pushing men forward, and Canada were on the counter. And you know what happens when Jacob Schaffelberg is running on the counter. But I do think it's a new finish for him. We haven't seen him do that finish kind of to the roof of the net. And I thought he took it really, really well. Had a couple touches on the ball, then put it on the roof.
I believe that was with
really
his left foot too, wasn't it? Wasn't that a left-footed shot, or was it his right foot?
It looked like a left foot from what I remember, but I need to go back and see. But yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this for Jacob Schaffelberg last year as well. He went with Canada and scored that goal against the U.S., if you remember, in extra time. And that was his only other international goal. And he had scored a couple goals for Nashville SC before that. But then after that, it kind of dried out. So his biggest mission is obviously not doing that again.
Well, it was a confident finish. I mean, how many times do we say with strikers, if they find the back of the net once or twice, suddenly the net looks twice as large and they're finishing like crazy. Like we used to talk about that with Daniel Rios, like when you're going roof of the net, like you are a confident finisher, and that's brought on by his start to the season. And yeah, it's all about maintaining that level now for Schaffelberg.
Yeah, and then the other Nashville SC player involved was Anibal Godoy. He played 68 minutes against well, first of all against Mexico in a 3-0 loss in the Nations League semifinal, and then for third place in the CONCACAF Nations League, he also played 68 minutes against Jamaica in a 1-0 loss for Panama. So just the fact that he got brought out in the 68th minute in both of those matches makes me think that there was some agreement between the club and the national team, which is something we've heard from the Nashville SC side, that Anibal Godoy is on the wrong side of 30, and he can't play 90 minutes in and out every week. And I think there was something to that. He's the captain of the national team. He's the prominent guy when it comes to Panama, and he's the leader of that team. I think they want him there. They want him involved, even though a lot of people thought his national team sort of reign was over, but he's still there. But yeah, unfortunately for Panama, they can't get a result against Mexico or Jamaica. And both Schaffelberg and Godoy should return to Nashville and play, or be available at least, for the Columbus match coming up.
And then the U.S. men's national team also had a couple matches, beating Jamaica in dramatic fashion, in extra time, which was definitely scary for the team. But then coming back against Mexico and winning 2-0, absolutely beautiful goal from Tyler Adams. I thought it was great to hear like his post-game conference. He was sitting there drinking a Truly, by the way, while talking to like Clint Dempsey and Jesse March, and it was great. Where he was just like, yeah, Greg told me to play the diagonal ball there, and I just did what shooters do, and I shot, and he took the shot, and obviously it was terrific. It was good to see Gio Reyna get on the score sheet as well. To win, that match 2-0, I think is a really good result for the national team going forward, with momentum going into Copa America.
It's also a good reminder that people on Twitter aren't inside the locker room. I think that was very apparent in a lot of the national team stuff that has come out over the last week or so. Tyler Adams gets subbed off because he's on a minutes restriction, and there's a little blow up on the sideline with him and Greg, and then he scores, and who does he celebrate with?
Right.
It's something that you see. People were acting like Gio Reyna would never get back into the squad. Look, like I said, I worked in college sports for a long time. I've seen coaches talk about 20-year-olds publicly my whole life, my whole adult life. You aren't there for the day-to-day interactions. And I think a good reminder is this. And by the way, that's 3 in a row for the US, and the only winner of the CONCACAF Nations League. So shout out to a 7 unbeaten against Mexico.
And I am going to take just this 30 seconds here to directly address CONCACAF as well. Look, if you're going to have these competitions, if you're going to have these things going on, you need to take a better stance when it comes to homophobic and discriminatory chants. It just is what it is. You didn't even follow your own rules and stipulations that you set out last night. Fans chanting to specifically try to get the match banned itself. You can't if you're going to take this stance that you don't want this chant in the game, then you also need to take a harder stance when it comes to the fans that are participating in this chant. Start kicking people out, start having fanless matches, start hurting the federation specific. Like, this is not cool anymore. It just isn't.
No, they don't need to start doing it. They've been doing empty stadiums. What they need to do is actually have a sporting penalty for it. It's one thing to come and mandate a penalty after this happens for like a year, but this has been something that's been going on for over a decade. And they've done the empty stadiums. It doesn't work. Anytime things don't go well for Mexico and they're on, international television, this stuff happens. So what you start to do is you start to count them as forfeits. If you start to count them as forfeits, they will stop happening.
It's just extremely unfortunate to have a game
and not just forfeits of the game you're in. It can't be that, because they're already losing that game. Forfeits of future matches. They shouldn't play in Copa America. That'll hurt them where it actually hurts.
Absolutely. I agree with you there. Like, this is one of the things where, I mean, and maybe I didn't realize the empty stadium thing, but I do think you have to take a harder stance specifically to get things to change. And if you actually are wanting that chance to go away, if you want it to be something that is rid of the game, you have to make the hard stance, CONCACAF, and that's on you. You have to do it. So best of luck to you, CONCACAF. I hope you figure it out instead of just putting garbage statements out after the match, specifically doing nothing. So anyways, that was my CONCACAF minute. Thank you very much for listening. Look, we have Columbus coming up this weekend. Columbus, besides last week against Charlotte, has been probably the best performing team in the league, for sure. Any sort of MLS power ranking blog had them first, even above Miami. Obviously, winners of the championship last year. It's a team that looks like they're just as good, if not better, than they were last year.
Yeah, they're very good. And Wilfred Nancy is a good coach. And they have good players like Cucho Hernandez. That is my analysis of Columbus. No, but seriously, I mean, they are still in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. They have a huge match coming up against Tigres 3 days after the Nashville match. I think Nashville would have rather be in DC's place, because that match with DC is sandwiched between the two Tigres matches for Columbus. But unfortunately for Nashville, they will have a full week break. Their last match against Charlotte was an outlier, like Steven said, because of some wild referee mistakes on decisions that just were wild. There were 16 minutes of added time to the first half.
Yeah, it was
so
wild.
There's that. Clay, you're dying to say something. Go ahead.
Well, I will be asleep when this game happens. So I hope to wake up on Easter Sunday finding out that Nashville SC's playoff contending chances have risen from the dead. That's what I'm hoping for.
Blair, that was an
All
Easter
right.
joke. That was an Easter joke with Jesus rising from, because it's Easter weekend.
Right. Well, Arsenal play on Easter Sunday against City, and I'm really hoping for a Jesus goal because, I mean, come on, the headlines write themselves. Like, come on. But yeah, but back to Columbus real quick. I mean, they are really good, like Steven said, and they've been the good thing about Columbus, or what they have excelled at, is playing their way and forcing teams to lose while they're playing their way, which is something that Nashville SC used to do actually a lot, by just being solid in the defense and then taking advantage of them. If you saw the LAFC first 20 minutes or so, expect very similar thing from Columbus to come up. That is something Hani Mukhtar even mentioned, is that they know how they play, because they play in that way. They want to have the ball. They're going to press you a little bit, but when they have the ball, they're not going to let you have it. So dream scenario here for Columbus is for Nashville SC to say, we're home and we want to go press full on and try to win the ball at every chance, because they can pass around you and they can play that long diagonal ball and get you in trouble. There are a lot of players to watch out for. I'm not going to go through all of them for Columbus, but yeah, they are the MLS champs for a reason, and they will be in this conversation going forward. And then also, I think maybe the only thing that I would say that might set Columbus back a little bit is that the match against Charlotte, even though it was an outlier, there might be some holdups from that. Of course, Derek Jones, who got the red card, will not be available. Wilfred Nancy was sick, so he might be back for the NSC match. And I think the only thing, again, holding Columbus back would be the 3 days after that they have a big home game against Tigres. Other than that, I don't see anything slowing them down. They are the best team in MLS.
These scab refs listened to this show, gave Derek Jones a red card on purpose so he wouldn't score against Nashville, so I wouldn't get my prop bet.
Oh, really? That was your prop bet? Oh,
my one was Derek Jones being the first previous Nashville player to score against us. So that's extremely unfortunate for me. Look, I think Valer put it best in the rundown. Columbus, very good. Nashville, not so good. I think that's kind of the best way to put it in the rundown. But we still got a game to play. And now we know the way Nashville can kind of play in their back heels a little bit when it comes to turning things around. So we'll give Clay the ability to give his plugs and predictions to start off.
Yeah. Check out National Soccer Archive. Follow me at Clay Lasol on Twitter and Instagram. You are going to see lots of pictures from around England starting Friday. So I'm going to be in jolly old from Friday until next Sunday. And
what's your prediction?
No, I'm thinking about that part. And and in
I
honor
don't know
of
how
me,
to do this prediction. I really don't.
in honor of me being in jolly old, Sam Surge is going to score, and it's going to be a 1-1 draw.
Mm. The fact that that is the most positive guy on the show just tells you where Nashville is at the
It
moment.
sucks. It sucks.
So
That's exactly what I was thinking about. He's just like, bro, look, I'm going to be jolly good. It's not even the fact that he gave a draw prediction. He says, I'm going to be a jolly good, positive man and predict that it's going to be a 1-1.
Oh no, I'm going to be jolly because I'm going to be in jolly old England. That was the thing.
Oh.
well, follow me at Valer Shabilla on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. But most importantly, subscribe to my YouTube channel, Valer Shabilla, because I have episode 2 of On Air with Valer coming out. And it's with Sean Davids. It's an incredible conversation we had. It's almost an hour long, and we could have done probably another hour with him. He was an incredible guest. And, away from all this like on the pitch stuff, I think sometimes we forget that these guys are real people with real problems and real things that happen to them. And Sean Davis just has incredible stories. So I'm really looking forward for that episode to come out later this week. So make sure to subscribe on YouTube, but also all these other places. My prediction, I'm going to be a realist. How about that? I'm going to say a 2-1 Columbus win and a goal from Sam Surridge. I'll stick with Clay's prediction there. But Columbus scores really early, and then scores again to start the second half, and Nashville ties it. Nashville scores one sort of later in the game, but failed to come back to the game.
At PHStevenHD on all of the social media platforms. I don't really do as much fun stuff as Clay's Valer does, but if you want some weird, outlandish takes, more than welcome to go follow me. I'm gonna be a little bit of an optimist here. I think Nashville's going to come back and get a 2-2 draw with a goal from Hani Mukhtar and a goal from Sam Surridge. So thank you again so much for listening to the show. We really, really appreciate it. We know how tough it is, even when Nashville loses as bad as they did, to want to listen to this content, but we truly appreciate it. Thank you again so much for listening to the show. We'll be back next week to talk about what happens against Columbus. And I look forward to hearing and talking to all of you about that. So thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next week.